Welcome to Discover the Difference, a podcast brought to you by CE3. I'm your host, Jamie Reed, along with Gabe Earl. Today on our show, we have Dr. Cindy McGovern, also known as the First Lady of Sales. The number one thing I took away from her was her reframe of ABC from always be closing to always be curious. It's something that we talk about a lot in the professional environment here at C3 with people, whether they're in sales or in service, that curiosity should really be the driving factor. And we try to carry those same virtues into our family life as well, so that we're always out there trying to learn more and integrate with ideas from other people around us. Cindy brings a ton of energy into this podcast that you can implement, whether it's in sales or just life in general. So enjoy this episode of Discover the Difference.
Where are you from originally?
So I'm originally from Florida. I grew up there, but I moved around. I was in Germany, I was in Georgia, I was in Tennessee, but I've been out here in California, Northern Cal, so up the road from you guys in San Francisco for 19 years. So
was your family in the military, or what brought you all over the place?
My dad was military adjacent, so he was a government contractor, so we were always near a base, but not on the base, so to speak.
What kind of government contractor?
That's a great question.
You can't talk about it?
I still don't know.
Oh, you don't know either?
I still don't know.
That's so funny. It is funny to, like, we'll ask our kids sometimes, if they know what we do, and
right.
To hear their responses. They become more sophisticated over time, but I could see the military being a tough one as a contractor to try to explain.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. I mean, I know he did something with like testing of tracking of things, but I have no clue. And as a kid, you don't ask any questions either. It's like, I don't know.
Is he not around anymore?
No, he's been gone since the 90s. But when it was like bring your kid to work day, I hung out with his assistant. So that was bring your kid to work day, was hang out with BB, which was cool. I loved it as a kid. Like, she was great.
How did moving around like that help give you the skill sets that you use now in sales and communication? And because it's kind of traumatic, right? To have to move around that much as a kid, you have to be adaptable.
You know what's funny? I actually think that's a great question, and the answer is yes, because I was often the new kid. I went to 3 7th grade. Think about when you were in 7th grade. Like, that's the most awkward age. Like, that's the ugly duckling phase for everyone. And you're like trying to figure out who you're going to be as sort of this preteen teen. And yeah, at 3 7th grades was not an easy, thing, but it helps you be a chameleon.
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of relate to that because my father was in the Air Force, and I remember the 7th grade move that I did. I don't know if I ever shared this story with you, but I just remember, going out on the playground and just standing in a group, so it looked like I wasn't standing by myself. Yeah. But they didn't know who I was. But I was like, okay, if I could stand here in this group, then it looks like I have friends.
Right.
And it felt.
I love that.
Oh my God, that's the saddest story.
It felt really.
I'm sorry, Gabe.
It was really hard. I remember that feeling. I go back. That feeling comes back every once in a while of just feeling that loneliness.
But you know what? I love that you actually did that. Like, that you had the wherewithal in 7th grade to be like, but if I stand there, I'm actually selling everybody else on the idea that I'm not by myself. Like,
yeah.
Sales at such a young age. I love it.
Yeah.
So if we go back to 7th grade, what did you write down that you wanted to be in sales or helping insurance people do sales? Or what would have you written down in one of those 3 different schools in 7th grade that you wanted to be when you grew up?
It would have never had anything to do with sales. I never wanted to be in sales. I didn't want anything to do with sales. And now I'm the first lady of sales. Like, go figure that one out. That's a whole nother story. But the 7th grade Cindy wanted to be some kind of performer. I wanted to dance. I wanted to act. I wanted to do something performing to bring joy to audiences in some way. That was the 7th grade. I think I still wanted to be a solid gold dancer, if anybody remembers that show.
So do you still dance?
That's my workout. That's my fun time.
I'm going to give this one space and see where Gabe takes it.
So so you're saying Zumba? Is that what you're saying?
No. I do more like technical, like ballet tap, that kind of stuff. But I actually loved hip hop. That was my favorite of all the modes that I did. And I used to teach aerobics, so I go to kind of a dance cardio class all the time, and I love it. Sweat it out, it's a lot of fun.
That's awesome. My mom, who had 4 boys and then finally had a girl, put me in ballet and then tap.
Yeah.
Dude,
and
I'm learning all these things about Gabe today. Why did I not know
I
this?
have pictures of me
Oh my
with,
gosh.
it's like, 14 girls with tutus, and then there was me. And I remember I loved tap. Like that was my thing until kids started making fun of me when I was doing it.
How come you've never done this at one of our talent shows?
I know. I need to get my tap shoes back out. That was a thing.
I want to be there for that. I'm flying down for that one. I want to be there.
I think maybe you guys do a duet. You two together. Marife dances. Maybe she'll.
Well, I don't know if hip hop and tap really go together, but we could try.
But I did tap too. In fact, my old tap partner went on to actually be a dancer in Vegas for like 15 years. That's what he did. He toured with Tap Dogs he was really, really good. And yeah, I miss that though. It was fun, right? And I hate that
you think about what could have been, the Vegas show.
Right. No, I went to college. He went to Vegas, and then lives changed. But it's so. I do miss that though, because it is fun and it's so freeing to do that. But that's my release now. Like other people go to the gym and lift weights, and I do that too. But mine is sort of these dance classes to kind of get back in your body, and and you have to think about it. You did this as a kid, so you remember, like you're thinking about the steps. You're not thinking about anything else, which I kind of love.
Well, if you go back to that 7th grade comment or point in life, were there things that growing up around military and moving around and things that really etched itself in your personality and who you are today? And what are those things?
That's a good question, Jamie. So I think for me, it was that trying to find where you belong at all times and finding commonality with everybody that you met, because it was always a new group. There was such turnover. Everybody was always moving. It's very transitional in all of those places. Even though we weren't on the base necessarily, your friend group kept changing. And so my ability to be able to find a way to connect with somebody in a pretty short amount of time and build that trust, deepen that relationship, get to something that, we're friends or we're not going to be friends, I think really does serve me in business, because it created a natural curiosity in me and it kind of fueled that. And I'm the kid that wants to know your like whole life story in 5 minutes. And that still, I think, serves me well in business, but it's genuine. It comes from that place of just wanting to find who you're connected with and find that common ground early on in life. Yeah.
I relate a lot to that. I was thinking about, like, even with my kids, like being now I've, done the opposite of what my parents did. Been living in the same place for the last 20 years, almost 20 years. And so, like, am I not giving them that gift of just being able to be involved in change?
Well, you move them around. I mean, he doesn't move, but you take your kids on like 6 weeks in Israel or 6 months in Costa Rica. So you're exposing them to change.
Yeah. Not as shocking. And I remember like those times when we're ready to move, and like there was a lot of resistance. And then you do it, and then you find your place, and then you move again.
And then you move again. But that's actually, you just said something so important though. Then you move again. It's always the change. You learn at such an early age that change is truly the only constant. So you get used to it. And so you're not as affected by it, I guess, in a weird way. Like you become resilient to it. So you get to roll with the punches a little bit better too, even as an adult. I think it does help you with that. But I love that you take your kids different places too, because I think that exposure, different cultures, different countries, make them be uncomfortable. I think that serves us well as adults when you have to get out of that comfort zone and figure out how to read the sign because it's not in your language. you figure it out. I think that's really cool.
Yeah. Do you think that's why for you connection is so important? Like connecting with people?
Yeah. Yeah. Mine is always about, I'm a bit of a helpaholic. Like that's kind of my thing. And I have been since a kid. Like I wanted to be the one that went and helped you with whatever you needed, tutored the other kids, that kind of thing. And I do. I think that ability to connect helps me to be able to get them to trust me and know that I'm doing this out of genuine curiosity or genuine desire to help, not that I'm trying to get something out of this. And you can read, I mean, kids can read that a mile away. So,
Well, I want to ask about that because I was thinking about 3 words you said. I was formulating a question when Gabe asked his, and then you just said the 3 words again. And I think as a relationship person, the connectedness is the means with which you do it. But how you do it, you cited, so connected is one, but then you cited trust and curiosity as sort of the vehicles to do it. I'm curious, like for people who are listening, especially like people don't believe that I'm an introvert, but like I actually feel anxiety going into a room of all new people, right? Like Gabe is amazing at it. I can tell you're amazing at it. But for people like me who are like socially enabled, but it's still intimidating or, you know, to just walk in and connect with people. You do it through trust and you do it through curiosity, but are there tools around those 2 things that you can give someone like me or other people that have anxiety about a room full of unknown people that help them do that?
yes. Okay. First off, I have to just say, I think I test as an extrovert, but I think I'm probably an introvert. So it's the way I recharge my batteries is like I need to sit on my couch with my dog. So
me too.
I get that. And I would also say that a lot of extroverts have that same sense of anxiety that you feel, Jamie. It's just we figured out how to put the butterflies in formation a little bit. So the way that I do that is it is first of all finding that initial connection, that what do I have in common? We're pack animals at the end of the day. I walk in a room, I see somebody that, you know, looks familiar that I saw somewhere else, or I see somebody that has a jacket that I like, something where you're like, okay, I can be connected to this person. That's the first thing. But for the anxiety part is, I really think it's about having a plan of what you're trying to accomplish in that moment anyways. Are you really trying to make a connection? Are you trying to just read the room and get the heck out of there and check the box? Do you want to meet people? Know what your goal is. And then you go in with that curiosity of how you're going to achieve it. And introverts, in my opinion, actually make better salespeople a lot of times than extroverts because you're better listeners. You also have that natural curiosity. You ask deeper questions. But introverts, they don't
We're very
want to be the
competitive, by
talker.
the way. He's got to. We compare each other all the time. So
I love it. I love this though. But it's true. Like you have a natural curiosity as an introvert, so you would rather give somebody else the floor to talk, which is great. You know, most people want to talk about themselves or talk about the weather or talk about whatever it is. So I think my advice to folks like you and who have that sort of same anxiety is lean into the stuff you're good at. You don't have to go in there and be on stage. Go in there and use your own superpowers. And if your best superpower is listening, go in armed with a couple of really good questions and you're going to like win the room.
we're just talking about that with our EVP of HR and how she's so good at communicating. And actually, I was just doing her review. And one of the things that came out of it was the reason why, you know, her strength is so good at communicating is she's such a good active listener. Mm-hmm. And so then when people really feel heard and validated, then you can actually get the point across whatever you're trying to connect with.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you're saying from that?
Absolutely. I think that what's interesting and kind of go back to that anxiety and introvert versus extrovert, nothing happens until trust exists, right? Like we know this, we're all salespeople here, so we can say this, like no sale happens without trust, but you're selling yourself in that personal interaction. You're selling yourself to that room of people, the group of people, the other person you're speaking with. They have to trust that there's something here. There's a foundation. And I think we confuse rapport and trust. You know, rapport is, all right, high five you and I'm out of here. Trust is, I actually care about what happens in this interaction. And you can feel that in somebody. You can feel it a mile away if they're just here to rub elbows and get the heck out of Dodge. So, to the point, your HR person, there is that sense of, this is real for me. I'm trying to make a genuine connection with you. I'm trying to deepen this trust. So this is a comfortable situation for you and me. And I think that speaks more volumes than anything else that you could come out of your mouth, actually.
Well, I'm just reading some of your history here of, degrees in communication, and masters in communication, PhD in organizational communication. Where was it in your life that you decided you wanted to take these things you learned about having to connect with people from moving all around and really dive into it to another level?
So there's a very pivotal moment that I had, and it was after I got put into a sales role. I always wanted to help people with communication. That's why I got the PhD, and I was a college professor for a while. I always wanted to teach. I was always sort of a teacher in some way. But I got put into a sales role, actually kicking and screaming. I didn't want to be in sales. I thought it was icky and pushy, and you had to be fast talking and funny. And I don't play golf and I don't drink whiskey. So I was like, I can't do that job. I don't know what to do. And when I got into the role, I realized I'd been selling my entire life. I just didn't call it sales. And that was the moment where I went, wait a minute, I have 3 higher education degrees from good schools in communication, and I was never taught this. And that's when I had to do the deep dive. That's when I had to start the consulting company. That's where it took a turn for me. I'm like, I am now on a mission to help people understand that's actually one of the most important communication skills, is knowing sales, every interaction.
I don't know why it popped into my head, but maybe because I want to explore this, idea of, you mentioned first lady of sales. But, when I think about it, we obviously, maybe it was because you mentioned whiskey and golf, and that's very, very masculine arena. And that's what I think sales has historically kind of leaned into, this very masculine place. So I'm just kind of curious about how you broke through that. What was your experience in breaking through that, as a very successful female in the sales arena?
It wasn't easy at first to be taken seriously. And I was very young at the time too. And I'm petite and blonde, and, all the blonde jokes were flying at that time too. So there were a few actual things battling against me, but I went in with my natural curiosity. And I honestly will tell you, I think that's what did it. Is I was okay walking away if it wasn't a fit, because I was more curious and doing the right thing for the client. And I walked away from a lot of things and got in trouble for some of them, but I was okay with it. But I also sold stuff we didn't have yet. So there's an innovation aspect. When I was working at the other company, there was a joke that I sold vaporware, because I'd come back and be like, hey, we're going to build this. They're like, we don't have that. I'm like, oh, we can build it. So
that sounds familiar with this guy. He's always selling things that we don't have. They don't exist yet.
We'll figure it out. Right, Jamie?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
They need
If
this.
we sell it, then we have a problem.
Yeah, it's like, we'll figure it out. But I really do believe that was sort of the thing that drove me. But I also got to say, whether it was a good old boys club or not, I felt very supported by the men around me. I felt really honored to be in their company, and I learned a lot from them, and I learned a lot from women too, but there weren't many. That's how I got the nickname the First Lady of Sales. I was the only one.
Yeah,
so,
especially in the insurance arena, right?
Yeah, there was nobody around. And so I really feel like I had good support, good mentors, but I also saw what I didn't want to be. And I was like, I'm not that. Like, golf's great. I tried. I'm terrible at it, and it wasn't fun. It's way too slow for me. So I'm like, I got to do something else. And I'm not the one that's going to go and take you to the bar and have cocktails. I was like, I need to find how I'm going to sell. And mine is really that, we say the consultative sales approach, but mine is really about, tell me where you really want to go here. Let me use my psychology background to figure this out. and understand you, and then see if we've got a solution. And if we don't, I'm okay at the end of the day, but I want to really leave you better than I found you.
Yeah, when you talk about the walking away, obviously there's learning in that, right? It's an opportunity. Is that the walking away from the golf and the whiskey, or is that like walking away from the client that doesn't fit, that maybe has that, old school sexist kind of mentality?
It's actually both, because I had to realize that I didn't need to do the whiskey and the golf to make it in this industry. But it's really about the clients and recognizing who's a good partner and who's not. Because at the end of the day, if we're not going to be a good partner, it's not good for you or me. And I'm okay with that. And I will actually a lot of times refer you to somebody else that is a better fit for you. And that's good with me, because one of our values here is to leave them better than we found them. And sometimes that does mean taking ourselves out of the mix. And that's all right.
It's funny because people ask us all the time, we get invited all the time to golf stuff, and Gabe are like, we must be the only two founders of an insurance brokerage who don't golf. Like, we don't, so we're with you. But my question for you is, we have a lot of developing producers, right? Who haven't made it to the big time or gotten to where their dream is yet. And some of the times, either where we're present or we're Monday morning quarterbacking an interaction, what we'll find is that the self-inflicted pressure that they're putting on themselves to hit their goals, because either they're financially strained or they're just not where they want to be yet, that they're not putting the person sitting across from them first. So like, to be genuinely curious about somebody, you have to remove all of your motivation from the conversation. And it has to be 100% about them and 0 about you. And I find this is one of the hardest things, where somebody isn't doing that. You feel their intention come out in the conversation. Is there something for us, coaches, leaders, whatever, who are grooming people? Is there a way to get that through so that people really connect to the fact that if they don't remove all their motivation, their own motivations out of it, that they can't truly be there for the other person 100%?
And to add to that is is that resistance against, a human nature or not?
Really good question. I'll answer the last one first. I think it does go against human nature a little bit, because we want to win, right? So you're not in sales if you're happy with losing. So I do think it goes against it. But I also think it's your definition of winning, which kind of goes to your question, Jamie, of, is winning really if we're forcing ourselves into a bad partnership? I don't think so. I think that's actually a form of losing. So it's being okay with, this one didn't work out. But for you as sales coaches, it goes back to the sales funnel, and you have to have a high failure rate. I mean, we know this from batting averages and everything else for Hall of Fame. Like, there's a lot of failure, and there should be, because you have more at bats. And so it's recognizing that there is some math involved, which I know salespeople always buck the system when I make them do their sales funnel. But if you're okay with that, and okay, I'm going to get 5 at bats and 2 are going to be good, great. You're okay to walk away from that, because what ends up happening is you're not okay walking away from it. And I've even seen really good salespeople who can't stand to lose. So they'll shoehorn their way in. We all know this. You can smell desperation breath from a mile away. Like, don't do that, because that affects your reputation. That person's becoming a walking commercial for you, and it's not a great one. That's not what you're looking for. And so if you go into every interaction, and this is one of the things I coach people on too, is go into every interaction knowing what you want out of it, but also knowing that they're going to be a walking commercial for you, whether the ink dries or not. So what do you want them to say when they walk out of that room? That's the impression you're leaving. Because if they trust you and they have something great to say and they feel like it was a good conversation and you listen to them, you're going to be much closer to the win.
Well, is there a risk in there where maybe this is human nature, pile onto what Gabe asked? Is there a risk to getting stuck in the friend zone? I think some of the salespeople fear that when you're only listening, and there's a resistance because you're like, I'm just going to be in the friend zone. We're never going to get to the good stuff here. And how do you pierce through that if you mastered becoming a really good listener to then closing a deal?
So great question. One of my favorite discussion topics. So I have to get on my soapbox for 2 seconds here, because this is probably 70 to 80% of the coaching that we end up doing with clients is you get stuck in this friend zone. You can't get them over the hump. You've had 1,000 conversations. You quote it for them every year. It doesn't go anywhere. You're stuck in the friend zone. You don't need practice quoting. Stop. Have a different conversation. So part of what to coach them on, and all of your listeners now, is what's the conversation you're having? Because you're being a good listener, but are you having the wrong questions that you're listening to the answers to? Are you really asking the deeper questions of curiosity of how this is going to impact their business, how it's going to impact their lives, what it's going to do to make it easier and better for them? Or are you stuck in rapport? And that's that difference. Rapport and trust is, get over the rapport part faster. Get to the trust where you can have the vulnerable conversation about what's really going on in their world and how you can make that impact on them.
That's great.
That resonates. Yeah. That resonates. Because a lot of times, Gabe and I will get into, we'll accompany people. And then next thing we know, we're talking about their balance sheet and potential bankruptcy and things. And people are like, how did you get there?
Yep.
Like that quickly, And the rapport versus trust that you're talking about is, I never thought about it quite like that. Yeah. I like that.
I guess, for the sales guy, how do you know when you've moved past that, like, that separation between rapport and trust?
So I think it's a very clear thing when you can ask a vulnerability question and they don't hesitate to answer. You read that body language. So like you said, when you start talking balance sheets and bankruptcies and issues with employees, you're there. It's when they kind of open the kimono and say, well, yeah, this kind of thing is going on over here. Yeah, that's it. But when you're stuck on that surface thing, you're talking about, and it's not super surface things. You're talking about friends and family and kids. That's great. But that's still in the friend zone. Let's get down to brass tacks of really what this means about a partnership. I need to understand if the baby's ugly or not. So tell me what we're looking at here.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, I know you mentioned the first lady comment. How did you get coined that term? And I know that, you talk a lot about personal brand. And how important that is in sales. Can you just kind of expand on that, where you realize personal brand really makes a difference? And then just for fun, tell us about the First Lady title.
So the personal brand came pretty early on, and I was about to graduate with my PhD. And I was 24 and about to defend my dissertation. And one of my college professors pulled me aside and he said, just so you know, before you go in to defend your dissertation, girls who look like you are not supposed to be smart. So you're going to have to work twice as hard in that room. And I was like, what the heck does that mean? Like, I didn't know what to do with that. And so I'm like, was he being a jerk or was he being helpful? And that was probably some of the best advice I got in all the years I went to school. Because what he was saying is, you did everything right. You did all the work. You put together a great dissertation, but everybody in that room has an impression of you that you have to sell against when you walk in the door. And I was like, mind blown. And that was the first real personal brand piece where I went, okay, I now have to brand myself as a PhD candidate. Like, I'm no longer the grad student. And it was an amazing piece of advice. I actually talk about it in one of my books because it was truly one of those pivotal life moments where I went, thank you for that. Because it didn't occur to me that I was selling against that stereotype. I was 24. I was teaching aerobics. I was, from the South, all these things where you can think of every stereotype that goes along with it. But I was a PhD candidate.
Do you think that was part of what drove you to be a PhD, was to kind of have that demonstration of like, very few people have PhDs and you got to be freaking smart to have that title at the end of your name? you know?
I think what drove me was I wanted to teach. And I knew that was a really good way to be able to do that. And I also had a dissertation topic that I wanted to research. I wanted to talk about how systems and communities created rules and ethical boundaries with nonverbal communication. I mean, you want to talk about nerd? I just went there, y'all. But but it was really important to me to provide some original research too. So I just kind of got bit by the bug. But it's a recurring theme in my life of wanting to teach. And that, so fast forward to answer your second question, was about the First Lady of Sales. I actually don't know who said it first, to be very honest. And whoever's listening to this podcast, if it was you, please tell me, please contact me, because I was about to get on stage to give a speech. And whoever was bringing me on stage said something about this little lady is coming next. And somebody said, little lady, she's like the first lady. And I was like, thank you for that. So I trademarked the phrase, and here we are.
That's awesome. You talk about personal brand, and Gabe and I, when we talk to people, we talk about it. Maybe it's the same thing in a different way. We talk about identity.
Yeah.
And the reason we talk about it, like in my own reflection, I failed miserably at sales when I first got into the industry. And I think back, I came out and I was wearing suits and ties, and the things that we're doing weren't really me. I was a truck driver's son and from the Midwest. And when I put on jeans and cowboy boots and I handed out barbecue sauce and I really was true to my own identity, then certain people were attracted to that. Now, some people weren't, but I started finding the people that actually were attracted to what was my identity. And I think before that, I was faking something that wasn't real and nobody was attracted to it. And so I don't know, is that the same thing when you talk about, do you know what I'm asking? Sorry,
Yeah.
I like kind of blanked on it, but I mean, like, I really think that if people aren't authentic, that authenticity is so important in creating trust in that relationship. You're not going to connect with anybody. And so we spend a lot of time trying to just get down to who are you really at the core?
Yeah. So to answer your question in a very short way, the answer is yes, it is the same thing, because it's about your authentic, like a lot of what I talk about in my book and in my keynotes is it's your authentic personal brand. Yours is different than everybody else's. And we're multifaceted. We all have different things. Like, you learned today that Gabe was a tap dancer. Like, that wouldn't have come up in conversation.
And I like him even more for it.
I'll send you the pictures.
But it's a facet of your brand that comes up when it's appropriate, and you're able to pull that up in the moment to connect with somebody else. So what happened for you is you were trying to conform into the group that you were in, but it just, it was a different skin. It wasn't quite right. Kind of like me with the golf and the whiskey, like not me. But once you found your path and you were like, it's cool to be me and who I am. And, good barbecue where you're from. So I get it. Barbecue sauce makes perfect sense to me. You're like, this is who I'm going to be. And I think that's something that I find a lot of newer salespeople, newer producers struggle with is, who am I yet? My answer is, you're already them. Now find out how to package that and find your other community that goes along with that. I'm not for everybody. I'm what the kids call extra. I get that. I'm a little more than some want. But know that and know who those ones are going to be that are good for you. And then use those other facets of your brand to find connection with the ones that are sort of adjacent.
So is that something that you see, is that a generational issue, or is that just a human issue where people really trying to find like if they're struggling with finding out who they are or knowing themselves, then it's really hard for them to have a personal brand. Right.
Yeah.
So are you doing like psychological coaching too in this?
Well, so part of what I believe and what I teach in my books and what I coach, and yes, there's some psychology to it, is you have a brand whether you realize it or not. Everybody does. Is it serving you though? And that's really where you have to get to, is you recognize, Jamie, that brand wasn't serving you. And it's partially because it wasn't your brand. You were sort of borrowing a brand and trying one on, and it's like, yeah, that one's not really for me. That's great. You figured that out. I think a lot of people don't have the blind spots that they don't realize the blind spots they have. They're not seeking to understand those to really understand their personal brand. But everybody's got one. Everybody knows it but them.
So is that part of the curiosity, is like not just being curious about others, but being really curious about yourself?
Yeah, and how you're landing with others. I mean, especially in a sales or a service role, you're connecting with humans on a daily basis. You're selling yourself before you're selling anything else. When I pick up the phone and I'm talking to a customer, they have to trust that I'm not, typing an email in the background. Otherwise, they don't trust that I'm listening. They don't trust that I have their best interest at heart, right? Like little tiny things that make a huge difference. So those are all a reflection of my own brand and how I come across. And so I think that awareness of how it's landing with the other person helps you to get better at your craft and even more authentic, to your point, Jamie. Like, I think you start leaning into the stuff you're good at.
Is that something you talk a lot about in your book, Sell Yourself?
I talk a lot about that, and I actually take you through. It's kind of a workshop in a book. Well, but it is. I mean, I wrote it to be kind of a workshop in a book so that you can go through those exercises to kind of get to that place of authenticity and who you want to be.
Well, obviously you're interacting with sales teams quite a bit, but I think I read something where you talk about the application of some of your concepts with the non-sales people in organizations. And if that's true, what's your thought behind that? And how do you see that rewarding organizations when they use that?
So my first job's called Every Job is a My first book was called Every Job is a Sales Job. And I really do believe that. I think everybody's in sales because you're selling your colleague on an idea. You're selling the producer on giving you another 2 hours to get the answer. You're selling the client on the idea that we've got this. You don't need to call me every 5 minutes, So I think we're all selling. And that's actually a lot of the work that we do with organizations is we go in and we teach their non-sales people sales skills. It's the same thing. We're all getting to the same goal at the end of the day. And knowing that sort of formula of sales just makes the recipe a little bit better at the end. And everybody's rowing in the same direction. So that's a lot of the work that we do. And plus, it's the thing I wish I had been taught when I was like 19,
Well, something tells me you had it innately. But talk about like when you come into an organization, what are some of the biggest challenges or resistances that you get? Because I mean, obviously people can see the value in really creating a sales culture and, everybody realizing that their job is around sales. What are some of the biggest, hurdles or obstacles that you encounter?
The biggest thing is the ick factor of sales. And I had it. I mean, I 100% had it as well. I was like, ugh, I don't want to do that. So I hit it off the bat with any organization we work with. Any of our consultants go in and we have that conversation of, we're not telling you to be. I literally have the avatar in my mind. I call him Tommy Two Thumbs. And he's, let me paint the picture for you. He's got sunglasses inside or outside, lots of gold chains, lots of pinky rings, shirt unbuttoned to the belly button, white shoes, plaid pants, that guy. And he's coming at you, giving you, the double thumbs. We're not talking about that kind of sales. Nobody does that kind of sales. And there's like maybe 1% of salespeople that do that, and they don't even want to be that guy. So we're not talking about the old way. We're talking about being curious and finding ways to impact people in a good way. And once we can get past that ick factor and knowing that I'm not asking you to cold call, I'm not asking you to do those things, then all of a sudden people are a little bit more open to it.
Yeah, you're normalizing it and their relationships. Your avatar comment reminded me because the first time I heard coffee is for closers, it was actually a client manager. The first client manager I ever worked with referenced it. I'm like, I love that saying. Where'd you get that? He's like, oh my God, you haven't watched Glenn Ross? I was like, Glenn what? And so now I think there's only 30 seconds of that movie that's actually good, but it's all around that 30-second bit there. But that's like the epitome of, I think, everything you're describing in your avatar and probably that man's world that you walked into, so many years ago.
And we're kind of embarrassed because that's the name of our
sales
our top producer award.
But it's as a joke.
But it's as a joke. I mean, I
We're
actually kind of
mocking it.
love it. It's like,
Yeah.
this is,
Yeah, we're
we're
mocking
gonna be
it
we're
for
gonna-
sure.
But I think that's amazing. And it's funny, you brought up Glengarry Glen Ross. One of the things I teach is ABC. But in that movie, it's always be closing. I don't teach that. I teach always be curious.
I like
love that.
Yeah.
We're gonna use that one.
In our Glengarry Glen Ross Award, how many times did Tracy win it? 3? So a woman's won it at least 2 or 3 times out of our short 7-year existence. So
Right.
it's definitely not the old man's trophy of yore.
Yeah,
I love
that's
it.
not patented, is it? Always be curious.
Say it again.
You didn't patent that, did you?
I don't know
Okay.
if I,
You better-
I did. I don't
You
think
better
I did.
copyright that one. I don't know if you could copyright
can
that one
use
or
it.
not.
You can use it. You can.
Thank
use
you.
it. No, but it's kind of my like snubbing the Glengarry Glen Ross, kind of like you guys with your Top Producer Club. Like I love that. It's like, nah, we're not doing it that way.
Well, we're gonna cite you anytime we use it, but we're gonna start using it.
I absolutely have at it. Have some fun with it.
Awesome. Well, did Mia warn you about our rapid fire section before we bring it to a close here?
She told me there would be one.
All right, cool. Well, first word, phrase, short thought that comes to mind is all we're looking for. You want to kick her off, Gabe?
All right, this was an easy start. How do you like your coffee?
I like a vanilla latte.
Okay, so I'm going to preface this question because I asked Mia last podcast, I'm like, do you make these like specific to the person? She's like, oh, I usually just Google them and find them because I feel insecure asking this, but it says, what's your idea of a perfect date? I'm like, wow, we're getting personal here.
Yeah, this is not a pickup, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh,
She wrote it. It's on my piece of
podcast took a
paper right
turn.
here.
My idea of a perfect date. I'm going to answer it in a truthful manner. I don't care what we do, but there better be laughter.
I like that.
That.
Absolutely.
All right, what's a cause that's important to you, and why is it?
Researching breast cancer. I lost my mother when I was 9 years old, and she was 44. And so that's been something I've done 60-mile breast cancer walks. Very, very important to me that we find a prevention in my lifetime.
I actually love this next question because I took a big stage once and I listened to Element from OAR on repeat before I went on stage. So the question is, what song would you listen to on repeat? And maybe I just
Ooh.
add, is it a pump up song? Do you have a song you listen to before you take stage and give a big talk? And what's that?
I actually have a playlist, and
All right.
it's the playlist that I put on repeat when I'm getting ready to give a keynote. But it changes. So right now I've got some old school stuff on there. I got some Flo Rida on there. I've got some Katy Perry. There's a little Swift on there. I've got that's a tough one. So the song on repeat, I'll answer that. I actually would say it's probably I'm gonna have to go old school Patsy Cline, and I'm gonna have to say "Walking After Midnight." Total left hand turn for you.
Yes.
All right, another fun one. Favorite professional sports team?
Ooh, I'm gonna make one of my hometown teams mad here, but I'm gonna have to say the Warriors.
All right, like it.
I'm not going to ask this last question because it's too close to my difference question I'm going to ask. So we're going to go down to a podcast called Discover the Difference. So we're going to wrap up with 2 questions about yourself. So Gabe?
So this part is really about reflecting back on your journey, and just having that conversation. Maybe it's with your 7-year-old, maybe it's that 7th grade self. What kind of, knowing what you know now, what kind of advice would you give her?
You are enough. Period.
I like that.
I love that.
I like that. So on the different side of the equation, if you think about all your favorite characteristics of yourself, what's that one thing that's the secret sauce that makes you who you are?
It's that helping piece. It literally is. I'm addicted to it. That's it. I'm going to figure out a way to help you. I'm going to figure out a way to make it better. I don't care what it is, whether it's me coming to dinner at your house I'm going to show up early, help you clean up. I'm going to be the one that makes the best extra dish. It's that incessant need to help and make a bigger impact.
Where does that come from?
You know, that's a great question, and I've been through enough therapy that I can tell you where I think it comes from. But I think it's that needing to belong. That if I can make an impact on you, then I'm going to belong in some small way, at least for a moment.
Yeah.
Have you psychoanalyzed Gabe and I to know how you can help us?
We need a lot of help.
Yeah.
I got some ideas.
All right, we'll talk offline.
This is awesome. Thanks so much for taking the time to connect with us.
This was so fun, you guys. I really appreciate the opportunity to spend a few minutes with you.
Yeah, obviously we met you because some people from our team heard you speak at an insurance event that Chubb put on. But for anybody else who's listening right now, where should they go to learn more or to connect with you?
drcindy.com is my easiest way to find me, or at 1ST Lady of Sales on social media. And through any of those portals, you'll be able to track down my consulting company and my books and our online academy, all the things.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much. This was really, really fun. I appreciate it.